All right, welcome back to ABA exam review and the continuation of our BCBA task list series with G3, establish and use conditioned reinforcers. It's as part of G, behavior change procedures. Very straightforward concept, but critical because reinforcement is a consequence that affects behavior in the future, and it's one of our principles of behavior change. And so the idea behind conditioned reinforcement is very important for you to both create conditioned reinforcers and to use them. So that's what we're going to cover today. As always, subscribe for all of our updates. Check out behavioranalyststudy.com for our study materials. When you pass, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. So to start, classifying reinforcers. Think about two types of reinforcement. We have unconditioned and we have conditioned. It's very simple. Unconditioned reinforcement is the result of the evolution of the species over hundreds and hundreds of years. So when we think of things like food and warmth and shelter, these are things that are critical to the survival of the species and are therefore unconditioned reinforcement because given enough time, they will function as reinforcement more or less for every member of that species. Even if you've dealt with clients who refuse to eat in protest or refuse to drink water in protest, at some point, they're going to need those. And at some point, the value is going to increase enough to become reinforcing. Whereas conditioned is the result of the learning history. And so when we think about conditioned reinforcement, if you think about, let's say, Legos might be incredibly valuable and reinforcing for one of your clients, whereas another one of your clients might not care less about Legos, have no interest in Legos, and those Legos have no bearing on that client's behavior because the conditioned reinforcement is strictly due to the individual's learning history, whereas unconditioned is due to the species as a whole. So species and unconditioned, we're talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. Conditioned, we're talking about that lifetime of the individual. Now, when you think unconditioned, you might have heard it called a primary reinforcer or an unlearned. It's all the same thing. You want to know these synonyms. So unconditioned, primary, and unlearned. Again, the result of evolution. So these stimuli are going to function as reinforcement or reinforcers without any learning history, meaning from the time you're born, you have basic needs. You have basic needs due to evolution, and it applies to every member of the species, more or less. You can't say, well, some people don't like to eat as much as others, which may be true. Chocolate cake might be reinforcing for me, but not for other people. That doesn't mean basic food necessities won't be reinforcing to every member of our species because the alternative of not eating is not favorable. So eventually, that hunger is going to kick in. And that's where our motivating operations come into play. So the common unconditioned reinforcers include food, water, oxygen, warmth, and sexual stimulation. Think about oxygen. Everybody needs it. You can hold your breath only so long, and you're going to have to breathe eventually. These ideas and these stimuli keep the species going. It's what we seek in order to continue living and keep the species going. Now, this is a lot more biological than what we usually discuss because we do deal with operant environmental behavior, but you've got to remember your ontogenic and your phylogenetic as well, right? And so it does help to understand a little bit about this idea of evolution and how it does affect behavior. Now, to the task list items specifically are conditioned reinforcers, secondary or learned, again, the synonym. It's a result of the learning history of the individual. So these are very individual stimuli, meaning I might not care for Barbie dolls, but maybe my sister really likes Barbie dolls. That's a result of the learning history. And how do we get there? Well, we have a neutral stimulus and we pair it with another unconditioned or conditioned reinforcing stimulus. So notice it doesn't matter what type of stimulus you're pairing that neutral stimulus with, as long as it has reinforcing properties. So you can pair the neutral stimulus with food, right? Or you can pair the neutral stimulus with praise. Okay. One is unconditioned, one is conditioned. Either way, that direct pairing will hopefully eventually make that neutral stimulus into a reinforcing stimulus. Now, there is an idea that the more pairing you do with the same stimulus, the stronger it becomes. That's not necessarily one size fits all, always true. What the numerous pairing do is it increases the likelihood that a stimulus does become conditioned. Not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily change the effectiveness of the stimulus, but it does guarantee to a higher extent that the neutral stimulus does become reinforcing. The effectiveness is still controlled by the motivation in the establishing operation. So you do want to pair as much as possible and you don't want to give up. So a common one is if a kid is very reinforced by, let's say, fig bars, but they're starting to damage the kid's teeth or the health, well, we need to change that. And so we start pairing the fig bars with other items. And we do it every single time. The more we do it, the better the chance the other neutral stimuli will start to have those reinforcing properties. Finally, generalized condition reinforcers. You hear these a lot. Think tokens, right? Think money. These are conditioned reinforcers not dependent on really any specific establishing operation through multiple pairings with multiple other stimuli. In other words, these reinforcers are effective in many, many different conditions. When we think GCR, don't think in terms of, well, I can reinforce a bunch of different behaviors, because in theory, anything that is reinforcing is going to reinforce the behavior it follows. The specific idea behind the GCR is that it's effective in different conditions. So maybe in the classroom, the clinic, and the home, right? Or let's say morning, evening, and date or an afternoon, right? All these different times and places we can use GCRs. That's what is great about tokens is they can be carried around and they can be used in a many, many different situations. Think about money. You don't necessarily need any specific establishing operation for that value of the money to be high. If you're somewhere and somebody offers you $20 to do something, as long as it's reasonable, there's a high chance that you might take that offer, right? And so that's a generalized condition reinforcer where we've conditioned it so many different ways and so many different stimuli that is just functional in so many different scenarios. That is condition reinforcement. And we don't want to overcomplicate it because it's not. Just the idea we take a neutral stimulus, right? Because this is all about learning history, and we pair it, okay, with a conditioned stimulus or an unconditioned stimulus. Now, don't get this confused with respondent behavior. This is still operant because we're talking about consequences here, right? With a respondent idea, and not to confuse you, right? The stimulus we're pairing is coming before response. So we're not talking respondent here, okay? Still stay with operant. We are still talking about pairing these stimuli together, pairing these items together. And you want to establish condition reinforcement because think about our previous videos on motivating operations and how the value of that consequence matters. If you're using the same reinforcer over and over again, satiation might become an issue. So if you can pair that reinforcer with a whole bunch of other items, you're going to be better off for it. As always, subscribe for all of our updates. Check out behavioranalyststudy.com for all of our study materials. When you pass your exam, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. See you soon.